She gripped the hem of his coat like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Behind him, the siren screamed through the London air. In front of him, a man in a gray polo shirt stared him down, one hand near the gear shift, the van's engine rumbling like a threat ready to explode. Inside the van, a thin mattress, a child's backpack, duct tape, a scarf tied to the wall, and not a single thing that belonged to a family. Captain Marcus Rowan stood in between them, rifle steady, eyes locked, heart pounding with the weight of a decision no protocol could prepare him for. "Turn off the engine. Hands where I can see them," he said. The man didn't move. The little girl, no older than 9, pressed her forehead against Marcus's back. Her voice cracked. "Please, don't let him take me again." That moment, frozen in time, wasn't the beginning. It was the end of a slow, silent storm, one that began hours earlier with a little girl in a lavender dress standing completely still, while hundreds of tourists laughed, posed, and snapped photos at the gates of St. Edridge Palace. She wasn't looking at the guards. She wasn't looking at the palace. She was watching a black van. And when her lips moved, when she whispered, "They said if I told, they'd hurt my dad," Captain Rowan made a choice. A choice to break protocol, to walk, to act, because something wasn't right. And today on Tales and Truths, you're about to hear the full story of what happened behind the polished gates, beyond the smiling crowd, and underneath the silence that nearly cost a child her life. But it didn't, because someone saw what no one else did. Before we dive in, leave a comment and tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing just how far these stories travel. And if this moment stopped your breath for even a second, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow's story may just change how you look at ordinary people forever. This isn't just a story about a soldier. It's a story about a shield, and what it means to become one when it matters most. Welcome to Tales and Truths, where ordinary moments reveal extraordinary courage. In today's story, a royal guard breaks every rule to protect a child in danger, and what unfolds will leave you speechless. If you're watching this, drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing our community grow across continents. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. This is more than storytelling. This is truth wrapped in bravery. Let's dive into today's incredible moment. The afternoon sun cast a pale gold shimmer over the stone facade of St. Edridge Palace. It was one of those high summer days in London, bright but unforgiving, the kind of heat that clung to uniforms and glazed every surface in sweat and dust. Outside the northeast gates, a restless tide of tourists swirled in anticipation of the ceremonial guard rotation. Phones were raised, selfie sticks waved like antennas, and children's laughter echoed off the iron fence. It was pageantry, controlled, chaos dressed in precision. But Captain Marcus Rowan wasn't there for the show. At 39, with 2 decades of military service behind him, 10 of them as part of the elite Royal Sentinel Corps, Marcus stood like a statue in crimson and black. His uniform was flawless, creased and gleaming, his bearskin cap casting long shadows across his steely eyes. To the crowd, he was just another royal guard, ornamental, immovable. But beneath that stillness, every cell in his body remained alert, tracking the rhythms of the crowd and listening for the one thing that never belonged: silence in the wrong place. He had trained himself to notice the offbeat, the sudden pause in a pattern, the flicker that doesn't match the scene. That's what caught his eye now, not the noise, not the tourists, but the stillness, just to his left, pressed against the black rope barrier that separated the public from the palace gates, stood a young girl, 8, maybe 9 years old. She wasn't laughing, she wasn't pointing, she wasn't even moving. She stood rigid, pale arms wrapped tightly around a battered gray teddy bear, her thin shoulders stiff beneath a lavender sundress. And her eyes, those wide, alert eyes, weren't on the palace. They were locked across the street, fixed on a black delivery van idling in the loading zone. Marcus tilted his head just a fraction, adjusting his view without breaking formation. The van had been there too long, over 30 minutes now. The driver hadn't exited, hadn't even rolled down a window. The hazard lights were off. The engine murmured like a low growl, steady and patient. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Legal even. But Marcus felt it, that quiet vibration of wrongness. The girl hadn't blinked. Every time someone stepped in front of her, she shuffled slightly, just enough to keep the van in sight. Her fingers gripped the bear so tightly its ear bent sideways. She was watching the van with the kind of terrible calm only learned through experience. Something in his chest tightened. He scanned for parents. A couple nearby, faces buried in their phones, might have been hers, but they hadn't looked at her once. Then for the first time the girl looked at him, right at him. Through the crowd, through the uniform, through the pageantry. Her lips moved. No sound, but he saw the words, and when he read them everything changed. Her lips moved again. This time Marcus caught it. They said they'd take me again. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Quiet, innocent, but heavy. Too heavy for a child that age. He didn't move. Couldn't. Protocol locked his boots to the ground, but inside, everything shifted. This wasn't a lost child. This was a signal. The girl wasn't confused and she wasn't crying. She was calculating, watching, waiting. Her eyes never left that van and now neither did his. He glanced again. Van's engine still idling. Driver still not moving. Tinted windows too dark to see through. Commercial tags, smudged and dusty. It looked clean enough from a distance, but Marcus knew better. Predators didn't dress in chaos. They wrapped themselves in normal. The girl shifted forward, her white sneakers just brushing the edge of the black rope. She wasn't crossing. She was testing, like someone weighing the edge of a cliff before stepping off. Then came the second blow. She looked at him again, straighter this time, and whispered a little louder. They said, if I told, they'd hurt my dad. Marcus felt it. Deep, primal. His grip on the SA-80 rifle tensed ever so slightly. For 18 years he had obeyed protocol. Stood still, eyes straight, rifle down, boots planted. But in that moment, none of it mattered. She was trying to protect someone else. That told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't fantasizing. She was recalling, repeating instructions she'd been told under duress. That's when he saw it. Her hands. The bear's ear was frayed, one button eye missing, but her fingers trembled only when she mentioned her dad. Repetition, trauma, fear, not panic. She was controlled, but barely. Every movement was rehearsed like she'd been warned. A deep hum rolled from the van's exhaust. The vehicle edged forward half a foot. Testing. Marcus shifted, just enough to unlock his stance. Barely visible, but meaningful. His eyes swept the plaza. Narrow alley behind the van. Possible escape route. Nearest palace security post. 30 meters to the right. Too far to shout, too risky to run. Crowd noise swelled again, kids laughing, flags waving, camera shutters clicking. But to Marcus it all fell away. He tuned it out. There was only the girl, the van, and the seconds ticking down. She began pacing. 3 steps left, 2 back, deliberate, focused, not wandering. She was tracking the van's position. Every angle, every possibility. Escape routes. At this point, Marcus didn't need her to say another word. He could feel it. This wasn't about intuition anymore. This was experience. This was pattern recognition. This was the kind of quiet, creeping threat you only recognize when you've seen what monsters look like up close, and they always look normal from far away. He leaned just slightly toward his comms mic, pressed the button under his collar, and muttered, "Post 4, possible child threat, suspicious vehicle, requesting silent backup, stand by." And then, without ceremony, he stepped off the mark. Protocol was dead. Something real was about to begin. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't break stride. Every step he took across the plaza felt like it cut through centuries of tradition. Tourists gasped, phones snapped to attention. Some chuckled, thinking it was part of the show. It wasn't. There was no pomp, no parade flourish. Just a soldier, walking toward something dark and very real. The girl, Alina, turned toward him. Her eyes twitched with tension, flicking between him and the van like a cornered animal trying to decide if help had truly come or if she was about to be dragged back into the shadows. She took a small step closer, gripping her bear tighter. Her voice was paper thin. "He said they'd be nicer this time, that I wouldn't have to sleep in the van again." That was it. No doubt left. No hesitation. This wasn't theoretical. This was active danger. Marcus didn't need clearance. He didn't need to wait. He was already moving. The van's driver door creaked open. A man in a faded gray polo leaned out, squinting against the sunlight. Smiling. That smile. Practiced, relaxed, polished, predatory. "Hey there, sweetheart." "There you are." "Sorry, officer. She's mine. Family friend. Bit of a wanderer, this one." Marcus said nothing. Just stopped between the man and the girl, body squared, rifle low but steady. His voice came calm, controlled. "Remain in the vehicle, sir. Authorities are on the way." The man chuckled, but his tone had an edge. He leaned on the door. "Look, mate, you're making this awkward. I've got somewhere to be. She's just a little confused." But Marcus was already scanning. Fast food wrappers on the dash. A road map with pages torn out. A length of duct tape stuffed beneath the passenger seat. No booster seat. No kids' snacks. No signs of any child ever belonging in that vehicle. Then, the girl whispered, almost into Marcus's coat, "He calls me Mouse. But that's not my name." Marcus's voice dropped, now steel under velvet. "Turn off the engine, hands on the dashboard. Do it now." The man's jaw tensed. For a beat, the two locked eyes. Then slowly, the driver reached for the gear shift instead. The van roared louder. Marcus raised his rifle, not aiming but ready. The tourists behind him stopped breathing. A tension blanketed the plaza like fog before a storm. The moment teetered on a razor's edge. "You're scaring her," the man snapped. "No," Marcus said flatly. "You are." From behind him, he felt Alina's small hand clutch the hem of his tunic. That was it. He shifted his stance forward, protective, immovable. A wall in red and black. He called into his mic. "Post 4 to control. Weapon ready. Driver refusing compliance. Child possibly under threat. Escalation imminent." The man's smile cracked. His hand hovered. Sirens whispered in the distance. The next second could change everything, and Marcus was ready. The seconds stretched, long and tight, like a taut wire. "Ready to snap?" Marcus stood firm, rifle steady in a low-ready position. The van's engine growled. The man behind the wheel shifting his weight, testing, calculating. The smooth charm had vanished. In its place, something colder. Something real. "You think that gun makes you important?" The man sneered. "You're just a tourist attraction in a hat." Marcus didn't blink. I have a frightened child behind me. That's all the authority I need." For a beat, the two men stared across the boiling space between them. Red wool and brass buttons on one side, oil-stained metal, and silence on the other. Then, from behind the van, movement. Fast. Sharp. Marcus's eyes flicked left. Just a flash. Of black, darting from behind a parked bike rack. A second figure, younger, hoodie pulled low, something metallic glinting in his hand. Marcus barked into his mic without hesitation. "Second suspect, left flank." The man bolted. Civilians scattered. Plainclothes officer, previously invisible in the crowd, broke cover and tackled the runner hard to the pavement. A small black bag tumbled from the suspect's grip, flopping open as it hit the ground. Marcus caught sight of what spilled out: coiled rope, latex gloves, a child's pink backpack with a unicorn patch. Gasps tore through the crowd. A woman screamed, phones lowered. This wasn't ceremonial anymore, this was real. Behind him, Alina whimpered. She hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound since she'd clung to his uniform, but now she shook, full-body tremors pulsing through her. "He's not my uncle," she whispered. "He said if I screamed, he'd make me disappear." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He took a half step forward, just enough to shield more of her body. His voice turned ice. "Driver, last warning. Engine off. Hands where I can see them." The man hesitated, long enough for 3 officers to close in surrounding the van. One went for the rear doors, another approached from the passenger side. The van's driver finally raised his hands, slowly, mockingly. "You're all out of your minds," he growled. "This is just a mix-up. I was sent to, pick her up." Marcus didn't answer. He stepped back half a pace so that Alina was directly behind his leg, still under cover. An officer opened the back of the van and froze. Inside, the space had been stripped bare. No seats, no safety belts. Just a thin mattress, a roll of duct tape, a bottle of children's shampoo, and a woman's scarf tied to the wall like a tether. The officer's face turned pale. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. Marcus didn't look. He already knew. He turned to Alina, knelt, down, rifle still across his chest but eyes gentle. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Nobody's taking you anywhere." The sirens finally arrived, loud and close. Blue lights bathed the cobblestones, and in the middle of it all, Marcus stood unmoved, sweating, silent, but unshaken. The trap had sprung, and this time it didn't close on the innocent. The sirens had faded, but the tension still hung in the air like smoke. The van was cordoned off with yellow tape. Officers in white forensic suits moved methodically, photographing every inch of its sinister interior. The driver, handcuffed, silent, eyes empty, sat slumped in the back of a patrol car. The second suspect was zip-tied and face down on the pavement, his hoodie torn, his bag of tools tagged and bagged. But Marcus Rowan was still at his post. He stood just beyond the barricade, red tunic damp with sweat, eyes sweeping the crowd again. It had returned. Tourists drifting back in, camera shutters clicking, conversations resuming like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Alina sat quietly under a wool blanket, held gently by a female child protection officer. The stuffed bear still dangled from her arms, its torn ear bouncing with every small movement. She hadn't spoken much since being removed from the scene. Her name, her mother's name, her age, that was all she could manage. Every word cost her something, every breath came heavy. Marcus didn't leave her side until the last signature was done. Not until the officer whispered, "We'll take from here." He gave one slow nod and returned to his post, same stance. Same stone-like stillness. But inside something was different. The crowd swelled and thinned in waves. Laughter returned. The smell of roasted nuts and traffic fumes floated back over the gates. St. Edridge's regality regained its rhythm. The plaza had returned to its script. No one knew that a girl had nearly vanished forever right there on those stones, until she came back. 2 hours later, a soft rustle at the edge of the barrier caught his attention. A woman stepped forward. No phone, no souvenir bag, just pale skin, dark eyes rimmed in exhaustion, and one hand holding tight to a child's wrist. Alina. She was in a gray hoodie now, her lavender dress poking out beneath it. Her blonde hair was combed, pulled back neatly, but her eyes were the same, older than they should be, heavy with things she should never have seen. The security officer beside them gave a discreet nod. Marcus didn't move. The woman knelt beside her daughter, whispered something. Alina took a small step forward, not close enough to touch him, not close enough to break protocol, just close enough to be seen. She looked up at him. No wave. No words. No smile. Just a single deliberate nod. It was the kind of gesture only two people could understand. The kind that said, "I remember. I know what you did, and I'm still here because of it." Marcus's face didn't change, but his eyes softened. Beneath the shadow of his bearskin hat, the woman gently placed her hand on Alina's back, guiding her away. The girl glanced over her shoulder one last time before climbing into an unmarked car, and then she was gone. To the crowd, it was just another guard shift, but to Marcus Rowan it was the most important mission he had ever completed. And no one even clapped. The plaza faded into its late afternoon rhythm. Shadows stretched long across the cobblestones. Tour buses rumbled back into the loop. Families wandered toward the parks, and the hum of conversation filled the air like a soft chorus. Captain Marcus Rowan stood at his post, unchanged in appearance, motionless in form, but inside something had shifted. His fingers no longer rested in quiet readiness. They remembered the weight of decision, the moment when duty collided with instinct, when protocol bowed to humanity. To the crowd, he was just a part of the scenery again, a red-coated statue, a tourist attraction. But behind that stillness was the memory of a child's trembling hand, a whisper soaked in fear, and a van that almost disappeared into the city like smoke. No medals would be pinned for this, no official commendation, no royal speech. There would be no headlines tomorrow. The world wouldn't know that a child's fate had teetered on a whisper, that a decision made in 10 silent seconds had cracked open a human trafficking ring, or that a girl named Alina now had a future, because one man had chosen to move when everyone else stood still. But Marcus didn't do it for glory. He did it because he'd seen what happens when no one listens. Years ago, in another uniform, on another continent, he'd witnessed the cost of hesitation. He'd seen children vanish in markets, in alleyways, in broad daylight, always just out of reach, always followed by the same sickening silence. And he'd sworn, then and there, that he'd never be the one to look away. Today, he kept that promise. Across the street, the black van had already been towed. Forensics would spend days dissecting its secrets: fingerprints, trace fibers, digital records, DNA swabs. The man behind the wheel, identified as Colin Merrick, had prior convictions for unlawful detainment. The second suspect, name still pending, was tied to a broader surveillance operation. What they'd been planning? No one had to say it aloud. Alina's name was now at the top of a different list. Recovered. And that meant everything. From his post, Marcus could see the reflection of the setting sun in the palace windows, long streaks of gold over cold glass. It was beautiful. But beauty meant nothing if evil could hide behind it. He didn't flinch when another tourist posed beside him. Didn't blink when a teenager joked that the guards were basically robots. He'd heard it all before, but today, behind that mask of ceremonial silence, he knew the truth. Sometimes, a soldier doesn't need a battlefield. Sometimes war arrives in plain clothes, behind tinted windows, in the middle of a crowd that's too distracted to see what's wrong. And sometimes, victory looks like a little girl in a gray hoodie, nodding, once and walking away free. No gunfire, no grand ending. Just one quiet victory in red wool and steel. And for Marcus Rowan, that was more than enough. By 5 o'clock, the crowd had changed. The energy had dulled, softened. Families trickled toward the underground station. Couples posed for their final selfies, and the line of school children once buzzing with questions now filed into a waiting tour bus. The chaos had thinned into background noise, but Captain Marcus Rowan remained, unmoving, unreadable, his rifle cradled in the same familiar position it had occupied for hours. His boots were planted, his shoulders squared, his posture perfect. From the outside, not a thing about him had changed. But inside everything was different. He had stood face to face with a predator, shielded a child from being stolen into darkness, disarmed a situation most people wouldn't have even noticed. And now, he was back at attention, part of the furniture again, just another silent sentinel at the gates of power. To most, the afternoon was forgettable. To him, it was unforgettable. A soft breeze kicked up from the south, lifting the edge of his tunic. The same breeze had passed over a van that was now an impound, over a criminal whose life had just unraveled, over a girl who would no longer sleep on thin foam in the back of a moving cage. Somewhere out there, Elena was finally safe. He thought of her nod, so subtle, so deliberate. It hadn't been gratitude, it had been understanding. She had seen something in him others missed. Just like he had seen something in her that no one else had. He could still feel the weight of her trust pressed against the back of his coat. That mattered more than medals ever could. Behind him, a new group of tourists gathered. A father pointed toward him, telling his daughter, "See the guards. They don't move, they're just for show." Marcus didn't react. He didn't need to, because he knew what that little girl didn't. That just hours ago, he'd broken every rule to save child's life. Not because it was his job, but because it was right. Somewhere a case file was being opened. An investigation was unfolding. Evidence was being logged. Statements reviewed. News articles would mention a suspected abduction attempt buried halfway through the local column. Names wouldn't be released. Faces wouldn't be shown. But Marcus would remember every detail. The white knuckles around the teddy bear. The way the van crept forward. The voice that barely rose above a whisper. They said they'd take me again. That wasn't a cry for help. It was a code, and someone had to listen. As the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, the final changing of the guard ceremony began. Drums echoed off stone. Boots moved in perfect formation. The crowd clapped, smiled, filmed it all. Marcus didn't move, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a statue. He felt like a shield, and that, he knew, was exactly what he was meant to be. If this story moved you, even just a little, leave a comment below and let us know what part struck you the most. Would you have noticed what Captain Rowan saw? Do you think guards should be allowed to break protocol in situations like this? Share your thoughts, your emotions, or your own stories of courage. Your voice matters, and your perspective might inspire someone else to pay closer attention, to act when it counts. Let's talk about the power of instinct, the weight of silence, and the heroes we often overlook. We're listening. Drop your comment below.